player who definitely hasn't proven to be a top 20 small forward. Heck, he's not even the best small forward on his team. Michael Porter Jr.
Yeah, I mean Michael Porter Jr. clearly a guy that I had much higher than you on my list. I actually had him above his counterpart Will Barton, who we have not seen yet. I'm sure a lot of people might disagree with that, who have seen Denver play over a number of years based on the consistency of Will Barton. But I mean, Michael Porter Jr., I mean, it's a guy who, when he played last year, I guess when like last year, obviously he finally got healthy, started to play, hasn't had many injuries since. But when he's on the court, he's a difference maker. And as good as Will Barton is, I can't really say the same. He's just a good role filler player. And like I said, MPJ is a true difference maker.
Yeah, and he was someone who was very, very highly touted coming out of high school. Essentially, he
Yeah.
was event before he got hurt. He was considered to be the number one overall pick for a little while,
Yeah, then he fell to 15, I believe.
which was mainly because he got hurt and he missed the whole first year.
Yep.
Um, a lot of people didn't have faith in him. He had faith in himself.
Hmm.
My issue with him is that we don't know if he's going to be able to play the full year right now. As much as he did play over 60 games or over 50 games last year plus playoffs, he didn't play that much. His numbers were okay, but he didn't play as starting number minutes. He wasn't a starting player. I just see that team keep going with Barton and with Millsap at power forward. The future of this team, though, is Michael Porter Jr. Moving up the power forward, Millsap probably coming off the bench. I think that would really unlock him, and that would really skyrocket him up the power forward list. But I think when we're considering small forwards, I think the people that are ahead of him um, just have a bigger body of work to be able to go back on and are a little more proven at this point. Not that Porter Jr. is a bad player. I see him as a key player of Denver. He's just not going to be a top three or top four player on that team for the next couple of years just because they don't need him.
Yeah, I mean, I would completely disagree, to be honest. I mean, to begin, like, yeah, I agree that he's going to end up being power forward. We had this discussion a bit ourselves.
He'll be a great power forward.
Yeah, I mean he's 6'10". I mean, why would he play power forward, right? But ultimately, what it comes down to for me is he did play some starting minutes. We've seen him play eight. We seen him start eight games last year when Barton went down. He started all those games at small forward, if I'm not mistaken. In those games, I mean, he played 32.4 minutes per game. His stat line during that, 21 and a half and 8.5 rebounds. So I mean, this is a guy when he starts, when he has, yeah, sure, it's 8 games, but guess what? We also touted guys like Nurkic last year, super high, who only played in seven, and someone else I heard earlier, who I sorry for not remembering his name, who only played 15 games, I believe, last year. So clearly, it is a small body of work.
Winslow.
Yes, sorry, Justice Winslow. But again, when Michael Porter Jr. did start last year in those 8 games, he was one of the best people on this list. You can't deny that 22, essentially an 8.5, would not get anyone on this
Yeah,
list a top 10 spot.
eight games. Anyone can have an 8 game stretch. Christian Wood had a great 8 game stretch.
Yeah, we put him
Um,
15th on another list, and it wasn't even a
well, for Wood, it was a little more than an 8 game stretch,
yeah.
but Porter Jr. for me, like he just didn't show it in the playoffs. That team went far in the playoffs, and he had a time to showcase his abilities. He played more minutes, and he didn't get more points. He ended up with 11 points per game, and on 8 more minutes per game. He wasn't more efficient. He wasn't more effective. His boards are up there, but he hasn't proven to be the star player yet. I'm not saying he's bad. I had him in my top 20. I didn't have him any lower than my top 20. I think he's going to be a better power forward than he will be a small forward. I I just to put a lot of people ahead of him just based on their career body of work being able to play those minutes. He just hasn't proven to me being able to play the minutes, even in the playoff time where I would have figured he would actually end up starting at one point. He didn't.
Yeah, but I mean, that was a team who played completely different in the playoffs than they did the regular season, where they got mainly fully healthy going into the playoffs, and they were able to ride just Murray and Jokic versus having to rely on other guys. The thing with Porter Jr. when he started is that team was a bit down in terms of who was starting. Obviously, he was fully replacing Will Barton on that team at the time. And with that being said, too, like you could say whatever you want about his playoff stats, but that's his first playoff run, still at 11 points per game. If we look at Will Barton has never had more than 10 points per game in any of his playoff runs. So that's not a guy that we can chirp in terms of his production when his first playoff run was already better than someone who you're saying is much better than him. So,
I didn't say much better. I had one spot ahead of him.
hey, but still, you're saying he's better.
I am saying he's better. Oh, I overall I'm saying he's a better player. Yes, I think Will Barton has proven to be a better player in this league.
Hey, I mean, overall, you can't deny that a guy who's had 6 or 7 years of about 12 or 15 points per game, hits at about a 35% rate, isn't a better.
Plays good defense.
Yeah, you can't argue that, but I mean, in terms of what they could do, and again, what we've seen in Porter starting 8 games last year, what if he starts 40 this year and he puts up that 21 and 8 mark? Yeah, that's obviously going to justify him a better spot than Will Barton, and that's what I'm assuming is obviously going to happen this year.
So, but if you're saying that he got 8 games where he played 32 minutes on, and he played 55 games overall. So in those other games where he came off the bench, he was only worthy of about 10 minutes per game. That's all he was worthy of on that team.
The big difference was the post and pre All-Star game numbers. Obviously, like because he was coming back from the injury, they don't want to fiddle him in, and because Will Barton was fully healthy at that time, there's a lot of minutes that are taken away from him. Pre All-Star game, he only played 15 minutes per game. There was 40 games before pre All-Star, only had 6.5 points. That drops his numbers a lot. He plays in 15 games post All-Star break, 21 minutes and a half, goes up to 13 a game. So he doubled his production with 8 more minutes. So.
Like I say, I have to see it. I'd have to see him actually do it for a season before I can even consider him any higher than this.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. I agree. It's funny how we're saying this because the person we have right on top of Michael Porter Jr. is someone who hasn't even played yet.